Welcome to this explainer. Today, we're diving straight into the clinical pathway for managing malignant breast disease, specifically breast carcinoma. We'll be using the DAPSIC framework to guide us through the whole shebang: presentation, staging, and management. We're going to take some pretty dense global protocols and turn them into a clear, easy-to-follow roadmap. Now, you might be wondering, how exactly do clinicians navigate all the complexities of diagnosing, staging, and actually treating breast cancer? Well, we're going to look at the exact tools healthcare systems use to take a patient from a suspected symptom all the way through to highly targeted care. Here's our agenda for today. We'll start with the WHO three-pillar framework, move into early detection and diagnosis, cover pathology and subtyping, look at TNM staging and prognosis, and finish up with multidisciplinary treatment.
All right, part 1, the WHO three-pillar framework.
So the World Health Organization lays out 3 fundamental pillars for population-level survival. Pillar 1 is the pre-diagnostic interval. This is all about health promotion and early detection. Then we have Pillar 2, the diagnostic interval. The absolutely crucial benchmark here is that the entire diagnostic evaluation, imaging, tissue sampling, pathology, must be completed within 60 days. 60 days, that's the target. Finally, Pillar 3 is the comprehensive treatment interval. The primary goal here is ensuring patients actually complete their multimodality treatment without abandoning it. Keeping these 3 intervals in the back of your mind is essential as we zoom in on the individual patient experience.
Moving right along to Part 2, early detection and diagnosis. The clinical journey almost always starts with a symptom. Now, while it's true that most breast lumps are completely benign, there are specific clinical signs that act as vital triggers to kick off the diagnostic pathway. We're talking about things like a painless breast mass or thickening, redness or warmth of the skin, enlarged lymph nodes in the armpit, focal breast pain, or progressive nipple inversion. Any of these warrant immediate clinical assessment. Recognizing these signs early, that's exactly what makes Pillar 1 of that WHO framework actually work in the real world.
Once a patient presents with these symptoms, clinicians don't just guess. No way. To confidently confirm or rule out cancer, they rely on a really strict protocol known as the triple assessment. It's a mandatory 3-step process. First up, a thorough clinical examination. Second, targeted radiology. And actually, this is kind of interesting. Ultrasound is preferred for patients under 35 because younger breast tissue is naturally denser, which makes mammograms a lot less effective. But for those over 35, a combination of both is standard. Third is histology or cytology, which is typically achieved through an ultrasound-guided core biopsy for solid lumps. You absolutely need all 3 of these steps to put the whole puzzle together and form a complete diagnostic picture.
Okay, let's get into Part 3, pathology and subtyping. When we look under the microscope, we'd broadly divide these into non-invasive and invasive categories. Non-invasive ductal carcinoma in situ, or DCIS, is premalignant, and a lot of times it just shows up as tiny microcalcifications on a mammogram. But when we look at invasive carcinomas, invasive ductal carcinoma is by far the most common. We're talking roughly 70% of all breast cancer cases. Invasive lobular carcinoma comes next, making up about 10 to 15%. Nailing down this histological type is our very first major clue for planning treatment. But here's the thing, histology alone just isn't enough anymore. The pathology lab also has to check for specific biomarkers using immunohistochemistry. They are primarily hunting for the estrogen receptor, progesterone receptor, and HER2 overexpression. So why does this matter? Well, because 60 to 70% of breast cancers are ER positive, which generally conveys a better prognosis. On the flip side, about 30% overexpress the HER2 growth factor receptor, and that's associated with a much more aggressive disease. As we'll see in just a minute, identifying this specific molecular subtype absolutely dictates the systemic treatment plan. It is a total game changer.
Which brings us to Part 4, TNM staging and prognosis.
For staging, the medical community relies heavily on the internationally recognized AJCC and UICC TNM staging system. It's a bit of alphabet soup, but basically, this system evaluates the overall tumor burden using 3 highly specific anatomic metrics. T stands for primary tumor size, N is for regional lymph node involvement, and M represents the presence or absence of distant metastases. Let's break down exactly what T and N actually look like in a clinical setting.
So, for the T, or primary tumor score, size and fixity are the key factors. A T1 classification means the tumor is small, under 2 centimeters. T2 steps up to between 2 and 5 centimeters. T3 is anything larger than 5 centimeters, and by the time we reach a T4 classification, the tumor has unfortunately become fixed to the chest wall, or it's causing skin changes like peau d'orange, which is a dimpling effect that literally looks just like an orange peel.
Then we have the N-score, where we assess the regional lymph nodes in the axilla, or armpit. This often involves a highly targeted sentinel lymph node biopsy. An N0 score is great news. It means no nodes are involved. N1 indicates mobile ipsilateral nodes, which just means they're on the same side of the body as the tumor. In an N2 scenario, those nodes have become fixed or matted together. When you put T and N together, they give us a really precise anatomical map of the localized disease.
Now, clinicians don't just collect these T and N metrics to stuff them into a file somewhere, they actually use them to help predict the future. They take these variables and plug them into something called the Nottingham Prognostic Index, or NPI. This is a vital mathematical formula used to predict a patient's risk of relapse. The math is pretty straightforward. It takes 0.2, multiplies it by the tumor size in centimeters, adds the histological grade of the tumor, and finally adds the nodal status score. It essentially transforms physical measurements into a tangible, actionable prognostic score.
Applying that NPI formula gives clinicians a highly accurate prediction of 10-year survival probabilities for patients who are treated with surgery alone. To put that into perspective, if a patient's NPI score is less than 2.4, their 10-year survival rate is an excellent 95%, but as the tumor size, grade, and nodal involvement increase, pushing that NPI score above 5.4, that survival rate drops drastically down to just 20%. This stark mathematical reality is exactly why we need robust, systemic adjuvant therapies.
And that perfectly sets up Part 5, multidisciplinary treatment.
Treating breast cancer is never a solo effort. It requires a highly coordinated, multidisciplinary blend of treatments. First, you have localized treatments like surgery. This could be a breast-conserving wide local excision, often called a WLE, or a full mastectomy. This is usually paired with radiotherapy to clear out any residual microscopic disease. But because breast cancer can spread microscopically very early on, localized treatment just isn't enough on its own. It has to be paired with systemic anti-cancer medications to treat the entire body.
Remember those microscopic biomarkers we discussed earlier? Well, this is exactly where they serve as the ultimate guide for that systemic therapy. For hormone receptor positive or ER positive patients, the primary weapon is endocrine therapy. We're talking tamoxifen for premenopausal women or aromatase inhibitors like anastrozole for postmenopausal women. Then for HER2 positive patients, they need targeted biological regimens, specifically trastuzumab-based therapies, which are usually combined with chemo. Finally, you have triple-negative cases. This is where the tumor lacks ER, PR, and HER2 receptors completely. Endocrine therapy simply won't work here, so these patients rely heavily on standard chemotherapy. In every scenario, the underlying biology completely dictates the treatment path.
This all leaves us with a pretty powerful final thought. We've walked through an incredibly dense, structured pathway today. We started at the macro level with the WHO's global 60-day diagnostic targets, moved through the clinical triple assessment and the NPI math, all the way down to targeted systemic drugs. When health systems apply these exact steps flawlessly, they actively prevent treatment abandonment. So the question we really need to be asking our own local health systems is this: how many treatment abandonments, how many lives could we save this year just by strictly enforcing this clinical roadmap? Thanks for joining me on this explainer. Keep questioning, keep learning, and let's keep figuring out how we can build better pathways for patient care.